Hi, this is Carlos Cousins, and the following is an SAT long passage question that is asking us for whether or not we can identify something that the author admits skepticism about. This is what we would call one of our classic hide and seek questions, where literally all you have to do is try to find any point in the passage where the author is, wondering about one of the following phenomena. It turns out for this passage that once you've read it, hopefully you'll remember, and a good strategy for remembering this sort of thing is try underlining the first sentence of each paragraph, because these topic sentences, especially in the body, these topic sentences tend to be the main references that these questions are going to, the main sources that these questions are going to reference. And it turns out that this sentence right here, it has sometimes been objected to this view that the solidified materials would possess superior density and would accordingly sink into the liquid portions. This is saying then that the density of the solid parts of the Earth when the Earth was being formed, you can think of this as like the solid crust of the Earth right now. If you think about it, the landmass over the water of the Earth is somehow on the crust, right, forming all of these continents, and it is floating on top of the mantle and all the other components of the Earth, right? But people are saying that potentially at the beginning, these very much hard parts of the Earth wouldn't have been able to float because of their superior density. But even though there's some skepticism about that, even though this is admitted, the author goes on to say, if this were so, solidification of such molten mass would either commence at the center, or a uniform refrigeration would proceed to the whole world would suddenly be consolidated. It is a general belief that the central portions of the Earth still remain in a molten condition, while the habitable exterior is but a comparatively thin crust. If this belief is well founded, and this is the key part here, the author doesn't say this is true. It's still wondering. It could be correct. It could not be correct. The first solidified portions didn't descend toward the center. So there's definitely some skepticism about the crystallization of materials to form the Earth's crust. We're not completely sure about how that occurred. Now, the existence of a sun at the time the ingenious fluid condition existed, that's not even mentioned. In fact, there needed to be a sun for the Earth to form, as it orbited around it. So that wouldn't make sense, and it's, again, not mentioned in the passage. Whether chaos existed before the Earth was formed, well, that's said right here. Was more fearful than the poisoned ray of feebly shining sun. Oh, and sun is also mentioned there. Here was chaos. So chaos is mentioned as well. So that can't be the correct answer choice. Whether solid iron will float upon molten iron. Well, that's the whole point, right? If we're talking about the solid materials of the crust, floating on top of the molten materials, that's exactly what we see here. We have hardened crust floating upon the molten mantle. And it's, we're talking about here fusible elements crystallizing, and this is in reference to all of the elements that we find on the crust, including iron. I believe iron is mentioned, but again, the whole point is that the solid iron will float upon the molten iron, so that has to be correct as well. The only skepticism we have is how did it begin? How is it that these materials were crystallized in the beginning? Why do we have the crust that we have today? So I hope that helps with this passage. Happy prepping.